my job is really what I've been looking at in teams as well. So I'm still a student. I'm still learning a lot. I'm still growing in this area quite a bit. So if there's anything that you have thoughts on, I'd love to hear it. But just let's get started. So first off, ethics are hard. If you haven't figured that out already, you may know that, right? Ethics are really, really hard. It's actually one of the most difficult concepts to define in general, and then how it applies to design work is also really hard. So why are ethics so hard just in general to start out with? So if we look at what ethics are, it's a set of principles, right? It's a set of principles that a bunch of people get together and they agree on this set of standards and principles that we try to adhere to together. But they come from multiple perspectives, multiple different groups. They have different sets of morals and values that really speak into it. And so it gets messy really, really quickly. Just defining ethics gets really, really messy because people have different standards of right and wrong, right? If ethics is based on standards of right and wrong, and they prescribe what humans ought to do in terms of like rights and obligations, benefits to society, fairness, and things like that, we have different perspectives on what that should look like. And so ethics are hard, right? We have different morals, different values, and yet we still, work to have a set of standards that we can agree on together. There's also different cultural and religious backgrounds that have different competing perspectives on what right and wrong is. So different institutions, organizations, worldviews, they all push at ethics from different angles. And then once we actually do establish a set of standards, we find that people find workarounds or what they believe are excusable exceptions. Things like the ends justify the means or morally right but ethically wrong are phrases that are very relevant to this. Often persecution on religious grounds is one of the more common examples of something that people would say is morally right, or at least morally excusable, but ethically wrong. So even if we can agree on ethics of right and wrong, our own set of values, our own set of standards often will, really trump whatever ethics are already defined. And then there's conflict and overlap between this thing of ethics, which are our standards, morals, which have to do with our own system of beliefs that we're part of, might be a religious group or our own worldview, and then our own personal values, which have to do with the individual level. So there's ethics, there's morals, there's values, and it gets really messy. And then in the end, we have this kind of conflict between our own self-interest and the common good. So again, ethics, if we go all the way back to the beginning, right, ethics being the set of standards that we agree on, there's this idea of a common good of people. But there's this conflict because each of us have our own, again, set of standards or morals, and our own self-interest may trump what we believe is good for the common group of people. So ethics are hard, but it's still worth us spending some time on today and trying to figure out how it applies to our design work. So today, what I want to do is establish a base understanding of ethics in design and why it's important for us to look at. I want to look at trying to make ethics applicable to any level of design work that you're in, whether you're doing UI work or whether you're in business development and designing teams or products like that. I want to help us understand our own roles when it comes to ethics and design. And ultimately, if all of us can, walk away with something today, then we will be able to impact the field of design by getting more people into ethics, a deeper understanding of ethics and design. So we're going to go through defining ethical design. I'm going to go through levels of ethics. We're going to talk through like trade-offs and costs of ethics, the role of designers, and then I'll end with a code of conduct. So this is a high level overview. Each of these we could probably spend 30 minutes to an hour in each of these sections, but I think it's worth getting this broad overview of everything first. All right, so let's define ethical design. So we need some kind of working definition of what is ethical design. We know that ethics is a big, large debate, right and wrong, different perspectives, but how do we actually start to define ethical design? Like, what is it at its core? More abstractly, what is it? What is a purpose behind ethical design? So something I've been using for a while, there's three parts to it. The first part is that it's objectively good, meaning that ethical design is objectively good. This means that it isn't subjective, it isn't open to interpretation. A reasonable person should be able to judge whether something is good or bad, either through observation or measurement. Now, again, this is a relative idea because, right, we bring our own perspectives, but things like, we would say starvation. Well, yeah, that's bad. So solving world hunger, that would be good. Not ripping off our customers, that would be, most of us would say that's good, right? Wage equality, we would say, yeah, that's good. Accommodating for disabilities, sure, that's good too, right? In design, we might say things like dark UX patterns, yeah, those are bad. Accommodating for screen readers, for people who are blind, we would say, yeah, that's good. Being compliant to WCAG, we would say that is good too, right? There are a set of things that most of us can agree on are objectively good for design. Beyond that, though, ethical design is also design that should be helpful to people rather than harmful. Because of so much of ethics is dealing with right and wrong, good and bad, harm, these things it's relative to that. But the design work that we're doing should be enriching people's lives. It should be helpful to them rather than harming them. So this is why like dark UX patterns come into play in this space pretty quickly, which we'll go over a little bit later. And then ultimately moral. Now, morality is a tough thing because, again, we have different worldviews. So when I talk about morality, I'm talking about things like loyalty, respect, fairness, sanctity, equality, care. It goes beyond simply right and wrong, and it goes to a deeper level. So, for example, we shouldn't treat people like they are disposable. We shouldn't treat customers like they're not people, right? This gets at loyalty. There's something ethical about that. So this first part gets at, this is design that's objectively good, helpful instead of harmful, and ultimately moral. Now, we could spend hours talking about this, but this is just a starting point. There's also a lot missing from here. We haven't talked about scopes of ethics in design. We haven't actually talked about a set of standards or principles yet. We haven't talked about the cost of design. But this is a starting point. Okay. So why do ethics matter at all to us, right? Why does it matter to designers? Why are we spending time here today? Why did I spend a bunch of time preparing this? Why have I been writing about this? Why does it even matter? So for designers, ethics show us how to work with our colleagues, how to work with stakeholders, clients, and our users. This isn't just about the people using products and services. It's also about the people we work with to build them. Ethics guide, or they should guide us through our design process with integrity. So as we are choosing what products, what services, what features to build in, how will we design services, ethics should be guiding that process with integrity. If we don't have ethics, we're liable to kind of drift off into other areas and start thinking about things like profit rather than people. And so ethics become really, really important here as well. Ethics help determine what features ought to be in products and services and what features we should cut out, right? That gets at kind of the design process, but really choosing what goes in, what doesn't go in. It assists in assessing the ethical significance or moral worth of the products that result from the activity of designing. There are certain particular features that we could design or products that their moral worth is questionable. Ethics help determine what those things are. And then ultimately, I believe that ethics help show designers how we can change the world for the better, right? That we have a lot of power and responsibility, and we're going to talk through a little bit more of that, but we get the opportunity to actually shape the world through design, and ethics play a significant role in that. Okay, so let's talk about levels of ethics. There's various scopes that ethics apply to design work. A lot of times when we start talking about ethics, it gets to ecological sustainability, wage equality, it gets to big things really quickly. And those things are part of it, and they're really important. Things like accessibility, though, also I classify under ethics. Dark UX patterns are also part of ethics. That ethics exist at both the micro level for an individual, the macro level for the entire world, and everything in between. So the way I look at ethics may be different than some of you. I look at scopes of ethics and all those different things in between. And I want to talk through that because I think it's important. So we start with something like micro, where ethics start with the individual, families, relationships. We're going to talk through medium systems like organizations, communities, ethnicities, religions, and how ethics are relevant there. And then we'll go into macro, nations, legal systems, economy, societies, the world. That ethics play a role in various levels, and us as designers need to understand which area we're working with at any given time, and need to be able to understand how to design for that particular area. This will make more sense as we go on. So if we start with the micro level, I believe that everything starts with the individual. Everything starts with the individual, including ethics. So this is small systems such as families, relationships, individuals. At a micro level, designers should consider the impact of their decisions primarily at the scope of the individual, though the relationships and families are included because they're tied to the individual. So some examples are actually ones that we should be fairly familiar with. Things like usability, findability, usefulness, valuable, desirability, dark UX patterns. I actually believe that these are an ethical thing, and I'll tell you why. And for me, this has been really helpful because it made these heuristics and principles all the more relevant in my own work, all the more valuable in my own work when I started to realize the impact they could have on individuals. So what I mean by that is we look at usability. Are you mindful of a person's time spent trying to accomplish a task? There's something there about caring for the individual that I know guys, we're wanting to sit in the rainforest, and we're doing that. That's part of this too. But we have to start by showing respect and care and dignity for the individual. That the ethics start with treating the person well, right? Even at the smallest scale. So we look at usability, findability. Are people actually able to find what they're needing to on your site? Do you hide what users need to find in order to force things that they don't need? Like, do you try to hide different things from them and try to force them into certain paths that you want as a business? That seems like it's relevant to ethics, right? Usefulness. Does it help them accomplish their goals? Does it account for their situation? Valuable. There's this exchange that happens between a customer and an organization where me as a customer, I give you, money or maybe my information, and you give me something in return. Is that exchange, is it a fair exchange? Is there a valuable exchange happening? Desirability. Does the person actually want what you're attempting to inflict on them? A more relevant example, so I have a story for you. There was this developer at a place that I worked, great developer, great guy. Some numbers or metrics had come out. We had monthly subscriptions and we had annual subscriptions. So the annual subscriptions ended up staying with us longer, because they weren't canceling after a couple of months. And they ended up staying with us longer. They paid us more upfront. It was a lot of good business case for why annual accounts were better for us. And this developer saw it. He put together an idea to make our sign-up process the default to be annual, where when you go to sign up for the service, the default option is annual, right? Not a bad idea. They can still switch to monthly. But what ended up happening is that, there's things like MVP and scope, all these weird things happen. And we didn't end up having the time to develop out and design this entire change to sign up. So what ended up happening was there was the very last page of sign up in our product. On the very last page of sign up, the price would switch to annual. So what happened was, the customer goes to the first page and there's a monthly price. Customer goes to the second page, there's a monthly price. Customer goes to the third page, they're still signing up, giving us the information, there's a monthly price. On the very last page of sign up, after they've already seen this monthly price 3 times, the price was switched to annual. and the customer was not aware of it because now they were entering in their credit card information, they're finishing the sign up process. And so what ended up happening was we had a lot of customers signing up for an annual account when they actually wanted monthly. They thought they were signing up for a monthly. We lost a lot of customers because they felt betrayed by us. They felt like we had switched this on them and we hadn't been truthful with them. And in fairness, we weren't. Now, it wasn't intentional, but we still happened. And if we as a company were looking more at our own ethical standards, right? Every developer, every designer, every person had this set of standards. We may have avoided that, right? So anti-patterns end up dealing a lot with ethics. So we think of things like deceptive interactions, so designing or misleading or tricking a user to make them do something they don't want to do. That would be something that is relevant to ethics. Leading a user into buying or signing up for something they didn't intend to, being trapped in a workflow when they're trying to get back, right? Trapping a person, that would be an issue too. Switching details like pricing without clearly communicating to the user. These are all examples of UX patterns, and they apply at a micro level. So I think start with, the individual. Other examples may be omitting or hiding crucial information like how to cancel service or requiring users to jump through hoops to do so. There's lots of examples we could use when it comes to micro level ethics, right? So as a designer, you should be asking things like, is it useful to a person? Will it help them achieve their goals? Is it easy to use with maximum efficiency or minimal error? Am I using deceitful tactics to trick or manipulate the user? Can a user find their way around your product or service? Can they locate what they're looking for? What kind of impact will design decisions have on relationships or families? Am I violating the individual's right to privacy, confidentiality, anonymity? Am I being truthful or misleading in any of my design work? These are relevant questions for designers when we're thinking about the micro level. But then we move on to the meso level. So meso, this is a really active level of ethics, especially within design, because we have here the businesses that exist here. We also have groups of people that exist here, such as ethnicities, religious groups, communities. So there's a lot going on at a meso level. So we have things like organizations, communities, ethnicities, religions. The primary scope of meso is clusters of people that share something in common. That's the best way I can narrow this down. So a group of people, religious group of people, the thing they would share in common is their system of belief. Or an ethnicity, the thing they have in common would be their ethnic background. Or a business, the thing they share in common may be the place that they work. Or a business itself, a thing that has its common, I guess, is itself. But there's this medium level that happens at the meso level. So if we just talk about UX alone, things like accessibility because we're talking about making things accessible to people with disabilities, or we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. These things become really relevant for us in our jobs. Now, there's a lot more happening here at this level, but for us, that becomes really relevant. So when we shift towards cluster of people with something in common, we think about things like, they might live in the same zip code or neighborhood, part of the same faith, have the same employer, share the same background, share the same lifestyle, sharing the same, and you fill in the blank. There's all kinds of examples of things that people share in common. The questions that we should be asking as designers would be things like, will this work for all users, not just some? So am I building or designing something that's only going to work for a select group? Or can my product be used by all groups of people, no matter what disabilities they might have? Is this accessible? Are features and results accessible to users who must interact with the product differently, such as older users, blind or visually impaired communities, people with dyslexia? Do your design decisions, features, products, services intentionally exclude groups of people, right? Does your product or thing that you're designing exclude groups of people intentionally based off of religion, ethnicity, gender? What kind of impact does your design work have on local communities such as schools, neighborhoods, ethnic groups, religious groups, and cities? And do design decisions reflect what's best for your organization or business? So the meso level can be difficult for some people because, again, when we're talking about ethics, we have different backgrounds, different perspectives, different beliefs on what we believe is right and wrong. And so sometimes we end up being, the ones who might intentionally exclude groups of people, or our business might intentionally exclude groups of people. But the role of ethics is that we shouldn't be discriminating against a group of people, regardless of whether you agree with a person or not doesn't matter. Your design needs to work for all people, be accessible to all people, not exclude any group of people, regardless of religion, ethnicity, or gender. And then we get to macro. So macro, this is the big one, right? This is the one where we think about ethics, we think of the big level. It's also the most crucial level for getting things right, which is probably why we go to it so often. We think of things like nations, legal systems, economy, societies, the whole world. At a macro level, we have to consider the impact of our design at the scope of the largest systems that span across clusters of people, individuals, families. These are systems that impact, many of us, or sometimes all of us. These are things like the environment, wage equality, laws, social norms, and the future of the world. It's worth noting that I don't know about you, but for me, I don't often have a direct impact here. I'm not being asked to design laws or systems of government or even big things like that. However, the design work that you do has a cascading effect to the macro level. And what I want to talk about in a little bit is what our role looks like within organizations and the work that we're doing in organizations and how that impacts a macro level. But when we look at macro level, we're looking at, again, systems of government, laws, countries, unions, the earth, future of the earth, all those things. The questions that we should be asking, again, it's more about these cascading questions. So you or me as a designer who is tasked with making an app or product that is addictive, what type of impact will that have on society at large, right? So that question, for example, you may not think that you're having an impact on the macro level, but if you are tasked with or part of making a product addictive, if that's what your goal is, you have to think, what kind of impact is that going to have on society? Or say you're a designer who's designing this awesome camera filter, right? That enhances or drastically changes the appearance of a female on TikTok or whatever it is, right? Or Instagram. What kind of impact will that have on the self-image of teenagers around the world, right? What does that do on a macro level? Or when designing cheap physical products that are produced on the other side of the world, what kind of impact will that have on the environment as landfills fill up with cheap plastic? What type of impact will that have on wages in that other country or in your own country? Or you may ask questions like, as a designer who's focused on satisfying users for the sake of company profit, what kind of impact will that have on expectations and behaviors of businesses across the world if more designers follow my lead? Fun fact, this one I was actually guilty of not too long ago. I actually wrote a big article on this. I was called out for it. I had to, make some changes to that. I had to, it's easy to do, but we have to understand that it's our role to not do these things, right? I was so focused on satisfying users, and I was doing it in a way where, hey, if I partner with the company to do this for their own profit, I could maybe get some buy-in for this, right? But that has an impact on a macro level. As a designer who designs a way to elevate and amplify the injustices in our nation or in any nation around the world, bringing people together to successfully advocate for law changes and reform, what kind of impact will that have on generations now and to come in our country? So there's good that can happen too. In fact, the work that we're doing as designers, I believe that we can literally change the world for better. There's a lot of scary things in there of all the things that we should be considering and we need to be doing, and we have to do those. But you don't need to act with fear and trepidation. You have to consider what you're doing, and you have to work to do what's right. But there's also this great opportunity that designers get to shape the world. The decisions that we make at a small level within a product or service has the potential to change the world for the good or for the worse. So we should be excited about that opportunity and find ways to do it well. Okay, let's talk about the cost of ethics. So one of the things that's really easy to do with ethics is to say, okay, well, now that I know ethics, I know that thing's good, that thing's bad, this thing's good, this thing's bad. It's easy, right? Let's just all do what's good, and everyone will be better off, right? But ethics, again, is hard. Ethical design is a zero-sum game. This means that it comes with trade-offs. One person's gain is another's loss. When we do design work, the cost of our design work, the cost of ethics, means that if I'm going to do what's right over here, it's going to cost someone else, whether through finances, through time, through whatever else. There is a cost to it. That's not saying we shouldn't do it, but we have to understand that. If we as designers try to do all the things that are right and we don't understand the trade-offs, we don't understand the cost, we will be laughed out of boardrooms or meetings because we don't understand what we're asking for. So we need to understand that and then find ways, knowing what the trade-offs are, to still push for what is right. Something that I've been using a lot lately is this little pyramid. It's not perfect. I found that it's pretty useful for me. It helps me to understand the trade-off of ethics. So again, doing what is right and good, it's going to come at the cost of somebody, but who? It's not free. Someone's going to have to pay that bill. We need to understand this. How do we understand this better? Again, this is the thing that has helped me, and I'll explain it in a second here. We can't retreat from ethics and design because it's hard or costly. So the reason why we have to talk about this, the reason why we have to figure out this is because when we go to CEOs or product managers or other managers or whoever the people are, we have to be able to talk about the cost of it. So let's look at this. If we look at something like the green is where we're trying to get something good, right? I skipped over a part, sorry. One of the things about this is that you can have two things, but I don't think you can have all three. So if you try to have micro, macro, and meso all in the middle, you end up just costing everyone. And maybe that's a good way to do it. But I found that you can typically have two of these. You can't have all three. And so if we look at something between the micro and macro level, let's say doing what is right for the environment and the individual, right? If we can do what's right for the environment and for the individual, it will end up costing an organization through maybe their profits, for example, or it may cost a local community, which is also at that meso level. It's going to cost them maybe through their taxes or changes in their procedures or laws or things like that. But it's going to come at a cost to that meso level. How can we work through that understanding? Or if we look at doing what is right, for example, between a meso and macro level, so medium system, big system, say a legal system would be a macro, right? We're doing, and again, we may not get invited into this, but let's just, for the example of this, say we're doing something right in the legal system and socially for a specific racial group or ethnic group, right? That's at the meso level. So we're at that sweet spot between macro and meso. It's going to cost individuals and individuals, families at that micro level. Could be financially, could be socially, could be legally. It doesn't mean we shouldn't pursue it. We need to pursue it, but we need to be able to understand that cost so we can talk through the cost of it. Or we can look at doing what's right by an individual and a business, right? You could do what's right by an individual and a business, but it could cost something or someone at the macro level. I want to take a few minutes and I want to pick on IKEA. So IKEA is a good example of this one, right? Let's talk about IKEA. If anyone loves IKEA, I'm sorry, they're great, but also, there's stuff here. So let's talk about IKEA. Okay, so they do some really cool stuff at a micro level. They have physical and digital spaces that are easy to navigate and for you to find what you're looking for. Great. Little to none anti-patterns or dark patterns in their digital spaces. Fantastic. They invest heavily in user satisfaction and usability. Great. They have a good balance in the exchange between value that's between consumer and business, right? They make affordable products. Good. Desirable products that serve the needs of individuals and families. They have products for people at different life stages, right? These are all good things. They focus so much on centering around individuals and families that it's actually been key to their success. Great. IKEA does really well at the micro level. Are they perfect? No. I'm sure you have some examples of where they really suck at the micro level, but they do pretty good. And then they also have pretty good success at a meso level. They don't, or at least they don't say they do, discriminate based off of faith, race, LGBTQIA plus, disability, or financial status in their products, their marketing, their employment. They do good there. They pay their employees relatively well compared to similar companies and industries. If you look at all the different numbers and charts that are out to the data, accessibility is a huge focus. That's great, right? They're making furniture better for people with disabilities. They ensure their physical stores are accessible to people with disabilities, and their digital spaces check all the boxes for accessibility. Fantastic. They have a huge emphasis in practices that promote equality, diversity, inclusion in the workspace. Good stuff, right? This is really good. But they're doing some stuff on a macro level that should cause you to have some concern. So first off, IKEA has become the largest single consumer of wood. 1% of the world's annual consumption. That's a lot of wood. IKEA has sold furniture that's been linked to illegal logging in forests that are crucial to Earth's climate. Google, look it up. There's lots of articles on this. It's not hard to find. IKEA has doubled its wood consumption in the last decade. And then it's not just that they, take a lot of wood, but most of their wooden items they feature specialty veneers over particle board. If you don't know anything about particle board, it has a short lifespan. It's difficult to reuse. It's not really kind of furniture you can pass down to multiple generations, and it's really difficult to recycle. So their furniture doesn't last either. Okay, so but not just that. I want to go back to the whole where they get their wood from, because it's kind of a big deal. So this is a picture of a forest in Romania. If you're unaware, there's these large old growth forests that exist in Romania. And IKEA currently gets, 10%. It's estimated around 10% of its timber from Romania. They're the largest largest private landowner in Romania. And again, they've been linked to, look it up, illegal logging that's in Romania. And these forests are actually really, really crucial to our environment. These are protected old growth forests. They shouldn't be really logging here. These forests are thousands of years old. These individual trees, many of them are hundreds of years old. This is a big deal. So IKEA is doing some really good things for individuals at a micro level, some really good things at a meso level, but at a macro level, they're probably say they got a failing grade, right? Not doing so hot. So what should IKEA do, right? We're going to put our designer hats on. What should they do, right? What can IKEA do? They can replant the wood they use for new trees, right? All the plant they use, just put some new trees in, right? That's easier said than done, because these are old growth forests that they're using. These aren't new forests. These aren't new trees. Some of these trees are hundreds of years old. It's going to take time for those all to grow back. So can they really just replace the wood? Not really, right? They could stop taking wood from these areas. They could change the way they use wood, right? They could do that. Change their business model. Is it possible? Sure. They could start making furniture out of recycled material. They could do that, right? Again, that would change their business model. It would be costly. Now we shift the cost, right? We're now doing better at the macro level. It's going to shift the cost towards the meso level, right? We'd be okay with that. Can we get IKEA to agree to it? I'm not sure. They can make furniture that lasts longer, so they're consuming less wood, right? So instead of having to, because their products are cheap and fall apart, they're going to produce more and more. You have to go back to IKEA, get more furniture. It breaks. You throw it in a landfill, you get more. So if they made furniture that lasts, people would be buying furniture less often from them. They'd be using less wood. They would have less furniture in landfills, right? They could do that. Again, that now shifts the cost either over to the meso level, or what they would probably do is shift that cost all the way over to the micro level on the individual consumer. But there's ways of doing this. And so when we talk about ethics, it's important for us to understand whatever we're talking about, the cost has to shift somewhere, right? If we understand that, it can help us in advocating for ethics. This now brings us to, what are our roles as designers? If ethics is such a significant role in design, and it's a responsibility of designers, how do we actually do that, right? So I believe that designers must become facilitators and catalysts for ethical design. It means that you are someone who is advocating for ethical design. It means you're someone who is referring to principles. It's someone, you're a person who's waving the principles to the, or the ethical principles and standards to the people who are making decisions and advocating for that work, right? Let's talk through actually how, right? Like how? Give me some practical examples, Nate, of what that actually looks like. So there's this guy, Mike Montero. He wrote this book called Ruined by Design, How Designers Destroyed the World and What We Can Do to Fix It. In it, he gives a couple tips. He says, working ethically is a skill. It's a skill that needs to be taught and then developed. It's not easy to tell the CEO of a Fortune 500 company that the product they just asked you to design is harmful. It takes more than guts. It takes knowing what questions to ask. It takes knowing how to test the effects of the product. It takes knowing how to build good argument. And it takes seeing yourself as an equal stakeholder in the product. It takes seeing yourself as a gatekeeper. And frankly, it takes some designers who have come from backgrounds and experiences that were harmed by the products of Fortune 500 companies. It takes a lot. So the first thing we have to do as designers is learn and master an understanding of ethical design. Today, if you have never thought or considered ethical design, today's a good starting point, right? Here we go. You've already started. Learn, master, and understanding and ethical design. Second, advocate and promote ethical design within the organization. Wherever you find yourself at, you don't need to leave where you're at or go into a different space. You're already in a space. If you're a designer, find ways to advocate and promote within your own organization. You enforce ethical standards among colleagues in your spaces. This last one assumes you have ethical standards, right? If you don't have ethical standards, that's where I want to wrap up. Code of conduct. Okay. Why should you have a code of conduct? Code of conduct is you recognizing your responsibility to the public, client, employers, and colleagues as a catalyst and as a facilitator of ethics. It will help you guide members in the performance of professional responsibilities. It will help you evaluate the risks and benefits of actions to ensure that whatever those actions are, they meet the highest ethical standards. And it will give you accountability through other members that are part of the same code of conduct. The code of conduct I'm part of is through UXPA. So UXPA has had this code of conduct since 2005. I'd strongly recommend you checking it out. One of the reasons I like it is that it is written through the scope of UX work. So it's very applicable to UX work. I'm not going to go through all the points of it. There are 7 sections, right? 7 sections. And each one of them breaks it down into a number of subpoints like this. So do no harm and if possible, provide benefits. Shows what that actually looks like. I would recommend you check that out. So I think everyone should have a code of conduct that they're working through and that guides their work. And so that's where I would start if you haven't already. So just to recap, we went through a lot. That's everything we went through. It was kind of a lot really quickly. I have lots of articles on this if you're interested in going more in depth. If you have questions, everything else, that's everything I have, Val. So I'm going to stop talking now.